What we tend to do is say, oh, I want to learn sales marketing, so I'll read a bunch of books and then I'll overcomplicate things and I'll try and piece them together. But really what I'm doing is practicing what I would call busy procrastination.
Hello and welcome to the Driven Female Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Melitta Campbell, award-winning business coach, value whisperer, and founder of the Dream Clients Blueprint, your step-by-step guide to communicating your true value with confidence and attracting more of your perfect fit clients. To help you start attracting more clients immediately, you can access a free training I've created for you by visiting melittacampbell.com/training. On this show, each week I bring you practical advice and tried and tested techniques through my own experiences and those of other successful business owners. Our goal is to help you dream bigger and confidently achieve more in your business and in life. Today on the show, I'm speaking with Matthew Pollard, the rapid growth guy and a fellow introvert who believes that introverts have the edge when it comes to marketing, sales, and networking. And that's just what we're going to be discussing in today's episode. Hi, Matthew. Welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you with us today.
Thank you. I'm ecstatic to be here.
And I'm really excited to have this discussion because we are both in a similar position that we believe that introverts have actually quite a superpower when it comes to things like networking and sales and really connecting and building great relationships with people. And I think that's often missed. So I'm really looking forward to digging into that a little bit and how even as introverts or extroverts who are feeling perhaps a little bit shy, taking their first steps in business, that we can avoid the sales process, but actually we have some really great strengths to bring to that. But before we dive into all of that great juicy stuff, I'd love it if you could introduce yourself to the audience and how you got to where you are today.
Gosh, yeah, that's an interesting question. So I think we should start by saying that as people hear me speak, I think the first thing that they'll think to themselves is this person clearly isn't an introvert, right? Because he's articulate, he clearly knows how to get his point across. And I want to help people understand that a lot of the people that they see as successful, they project extroversion upon them. And just because you see them as extroverted doesn't mean that they are, because we're seeing them as they are today, not where they came from. And, you know, to put a greater point on it, like Oprah Winfrey and David Letterman are introverts. So if you think you can't do small talk, obviously you can, they're pretty good at it. If you think you can't sell, Zig Ziglar, the most well-known sales trainer that we ever existed, was an introvert. And if you think you can't network, Ivan Meisner, the founder of the world's largest networking group in the world, is introverted. I'm lucky enough to be on the Global Gurus list of top 30 sales professionals. And while I'm honored to be the one that really pushes that introverted agenda forward, I know that most of the people on that list are actually introverted. So again, I will tell you that most of us project extroversion upon successful people. And I know I did it too, so don't feel bad, but let's work through this episode to help you realize that you should stop doing that and not see yourself as a second-class citizen and say, oh, but it's different for me. I don't have these natural abilities. Because when I was in late high school, I had a reading speed of a sixth grader. I was super introverted. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And I got diagnosed with this thing called Irlen syndrome, which basically means I put on a pair of funny colored lenses and miraculously I can learn to read. Now, I couldn't read like everybody else. I could start the process of learning to read. So the last 2 years of high school were tough for me, but I managed after a lot of hard work to get into the top 20% of my state. But my family could see that I was exhausted and I didn't know what I wanted to do. So if I went to university, there was no way I probably would have stuck it out. So we all agreed I was going to take a year to find myself. And, unlike some people perhaps that had rich parents that sent them to Europe or allowed them to just sit on the couch and perhaps watch Oprah for the year, I had to get a job. My dad broke his back 80 hours a week. There's no way he would have accepted anything else. So I took a job at a real estate agency. And before you think I was the person out there selling, I was the guy in the back office doing data entry with this look on my face, like, don't speak to me. I'm here to find myself. Well, that was great for about 3 weeks until my manager pulls me aside and he's like, I'm so sorry, Matt. We just found out that this office is getting shut down. You're out of work. And this is in Australia at Christmas time. So we tend to take our summer break and Christmas break at the same time. Everyone's going on holidays on the 20th of December and they're not coming back till the 15th or 20th of January. So no one is hiring. The only jobs I could find were these things called commission-only sales roles. And I applied for 3. There was the only 3 in the paper. And that was terrifying, just picking up the phone and calling something that said commission-only sales. But then my confidence was bolstered because I got 3 interviews. And then I actually got 3 job offers. And I thought perhaps they saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. until day one, where the trainer made it very clear they hire everybody, and they've got this saying, they just throw mud up against the wall and they see what sticks, right? And fun saying, I guess, until you realize you're the mud. Well, very quickly, I was given 5 days product training, thrown out on a road that was called Sydney Road in Melbourne, Australia, over 1,000 doors. And I remember going into my first door after having this horrible realization that no one actually told me what to say. And then I say luckily now, I was luckily politely told to leave. Shortly after that, I was sworn at, I was told to get a real job. And that just happened door after door until I got to my 93rd door where I made my first sale. And I remember I made about $70, which was an ecstatic moment for me until about 3 seconds later when I realized I'm going to do this again tomorrow and the next day and the next. And at that point, I feel that most people listening would say, well, I've just got to accept that that's the way it's going to be because sales is a natural gift of Gab skill, or, oh my gosh, I would have just given up. Well, neither of those options were valid for me because the world had never really worked for me. So I made the decision that what I was going to do is agree that sales was a system and live in this world of what if thinking. And I went looking for how I could learn the process of selling. And very, very quickly, I realized I'm not reading a Zig Ziglar book or a Brian Tracy book. It would have taken me a year to read them, let alone apply them with my reading speed. But I fell upon YouTube, which was just becoming well known in Australia at that time. And I typed in sales system and all these videos came up. So day after day, I'd spend 8 hours in the field applying what I learned, 8 hours back home practicing the next step or perfecting the one I was working on, and then 16 hours on the weekends, really trying to nail this profession. And while I wouldn't wish that on anyone, I mean, it was a terrible period of time. I'm sure most people would agree, but very quickly I got better. Soon it was 78 doors, then it was 43 doors, then it was 21, then it was 18. Eventually I got it down to making a sale every 3 doors. Well, 6 weeks later, my manager pulls me aside and he had this puzzled look on his face because, I mean, I thought I'd done something wrong. I mean, I was the quiet guy that handed my paperwork in downstairs. I never really spoke to anyone. Everybody upstairs was really boisterous, talking about that deal they nailed, that person that they secured, the fact the market was getting harder. He just looked at me and said, Matt, we just got our national sales figures. And it turns out you're the #1 salesperson in the company. Now, this was a company that employed thousands of sales reps. It was the largest sales and marketing company in the Southern Hemisphere. And I mean, it took 6 weeks. So that inspired me that maybe this is something that I could do. But they were like, well, because you can sell, you can manage. I don't know why people think that because, I mean, I had no idea how to manage. To prove the point, I got given 20 mud up against the wall, as they called it. Don't worry about it. 20 people, you'll figure it out. Well, I didn't. They all quit within 24 hours. Back to YouTube to learn how to manage. I got pretty good at it. As a matter of fact, I got promoted 7 times, and to the point where I actually felt that I could do this stuff. So actually I started my own business about a year later. Fast forward just shy of a decade, I've been responsible for 5 multi-million-dollar success stories. But all of that success really comes back to my unwillingness to accept the way the world, or the way the general populace says that the world works, because the world never really worked for me, and really finding my own path to success. And that's really what allowed me to move into the introverted space, because the truth is that introverts make amazing salespeople, networkers, leaders, business owners, public speakers, but our path to success is just different to that of an extrovert. And truthfully, even the path to success for an extrovert that's selling themselves for the first time because they find that really uncomfortable is also very different. And that's really where I found my home, and it's what I absolutely love to do.
Yeah, I love that story. It's so inspiring. And wow, you really went for it and stuck with it. And to have that result in just 6 weeks is amazing. But there's one word you said before you went into that part of your story, and it was like, I made a decision.
I mean, it's the most important part, right? Like everybody just accepts things. I mean, what I find, especially for business owners that are listening, is we say we want to start our own business, but really what we want to do is we want to make a great 6-figure income doing what we love in a business that revolves around us, our family, and our life, not the other way around, where we get to do the fun, functional skill that we love to do. And then we kind of try to avoid that sales and marketing thing. Sometimes we use our whole Rolodex, and hopefully that gets us a win, but then we get stuck. And what we tend to do is say, oh, I want to learn sales marketing, so I'll read a bunch of books, and then I'll overcomplicate things, and I'll try and piece them together. But really what I'm doing is practicing what I would call busy procrastination. And really, then I go back to the busy work of my business. I'm really just trying to put my head in the sand. And what it really comes down to is it's outside the scope of our functional skill. It puts us in this place of discomfort. And because of that, we may say we need to do it, but that's not really what our motivation is. Our motivation is just not to go broke, right? We want to have a successful business, and that's part of it, but in a lot of ways we avoid it because that's uncomfortable for us. So I had to make a decision that I was willing to do the work, because I mean, if you've read The Secret and go, I'm just going to dream that it's going to happen and put it out there, well, that doesn't work unless you're willing to do the work. So literally the 3 principles are, I made the decision that sales had to be a system. So, i.e., I decided to choose a different path. Henry Ford said, if you think you can or if you think you can't, you're right. And so I made the decision to believe that I could, and that I put good and hard work behind it. Now, a lot of people, especially in the business world, they love the whole hustle mentality, right? We just hustle, we're going to grind it out. That is nuts without a system. And I watched other people do that and have really tough times doing it. And to me, that's why so many businesses fail. Some, sure, because they tried strategies that didn't work. And yes, we have to validate that. Most, because they avoid it altogether because it's uncomfortable, or they just accept their inability to do it is the way it's going to be. And that is the wrong choice.
Yeah. And I love this idea of a process that you thought, okay, if I'm going to make this work, I have to figure out exactly what steps to take and in what order. And once you have a process, then you have something to go back and see, well, what's working, and you can fine tune different elements of that and make it work even better. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did, one step at a time to build out this process. And then it all came together and worked. And you very generously put all of that process in your book, The Introvert's Edge to Sales. But can you take us through that process a little bit? Where does it begin? And is it just a case of getting people in and a process of that sales call, or is it bigger than that?
Well, so firstly, it's much bigger than that. But I think that the important thing for people to realize is that when you think about sales and sales systems and the amount of work that it took for me to get to where I was, I mean, yeah, it only took 6 weeks, but it was also a lot of time investment in that 6-week period. So a lot of people hear, oh my gosh, that's this many hours. I can't give that amount of work in the next month. Well, firstly, you could do it over 12 months and still be ecstatic. But even if you put in a 20th of that, you would still be far better than most people out there. Most people put no effort into it. And when I say no effort, I mean that they go out and they sell, they're doing proposals, they're doing the act of selling. I mean, they're putting no effort into the act of perfecting it in an active way. Now, what I find is a lot of people will make the decision that they're going to learn sales, and they might read 6 books on the topic of selling. And then what happens, because sales isn't mixed martial arts, right? By piecing things together, you don't create a better system. What you do is create a complicated mess. And that means that sales doesn't work. So one of the things that I tell people all the time is forget about the bells and whistles. Don't overcomplicate it. I mean, of course, I would love it for people to follow my system, but I don't care whether you do or whether you don't. What I care is that you follow a system. And truthfully, the system doesn't even need to be that good. The system just needs to be a step-by-step process, because that is liberating, especially for an introvert and for an extrovert that's uncomfortable talking about themselves and trying to sell themselves. Because how do you not take rejection personally when they're rejecting your skill set and your ability? So what happens is, by adopting a system, it becomes this external process. Now, introverts have a real advantage here, right? Because introverts are really good. Like, what we tend to do is we ruminate about things that happened today and the sales that went wrong. And that's a negative behavior. However, we can use it in a really productive way if we've got this external system, and then we start analyzing in a non-personal way, what thing can I improve? Now we're using our analytical brain, and that is really, really powerful. But going back to the simplicity of a system, and this is really important, is that we talked about Henry Ford before, so let's use the same guy, because he's a brilliant man. He talked, when he first launched the mass production vehicle, his joke was, you can have any color car you want as long as it's black. Why? Because he just wanted to get the process right. He would never have managed, I mean, if you look at the number of vehicles that were produced in the first year compared to the over 1 million orders that they received, there's no way they would have hit that demand unless they focused on keeping things simple. So when you're thinking about sales, the first thing I want you to understand is pick one system. Now, when I say system, there are lots of books out there that don't give you a full system. They just give you some tactics and some tricks to apply to your winging it process. And I mean, this isn't new stuff. Brian Tracy talks about the fact that the top 10% of all sales performers have a planned presentation. A planned presentation. Think planning, introverted behavior. So the reason why there are so many introverts at the top, and by the way, the extroverts that I know at the top also follow a planned presentation. Jeffrey Gittimore, I was on his podcast, and he talks about the fact that he couldn't help others until he followed a methodical process, and then he could. But his hardest issue is getting introverts to believe in themselves, and that's what the first chapter of my book really focuses on. And by the way, this is not a pitch for my book. You do not need to buy my book. If you just download the first chapter at theintrovertsedge.com, I will literally give you the chapter that tells you why you as an introvert cannot just survive, but dominate in the introverted introverted sphere of selling and, well, in selling in general. And then I will also outline the full 7-step process that you need to follow. And I joke, I say, look, if you just put what you currently say into that, you'll quickly realize there's some things that do not fit. Throw that out. You shouldn't be saying it to clients. There are things out of order. Fix that, and then you'll realize there's some gaping holes. Fill those holes, and you'll double your sales easily in the next 60 days. So what you need to understand is the first chapter will give you that. And what have I just said? Yes, there's a lot of bells and whistles in my book, and that is great. And yes, it follows a methodical process. But if you do nothing more than just put it in order, you're going to double your sales. See what I mean by not getting too much into the bells and whistles? Keep it super, super simple. Get the widget off the line, to go back to the Henry Ford analogy. And then once you do that and you feel comfortable, then step it up. And to go back to your original question of, is it really about sales, or are there things we can do to make it easy? Well, the truth is that most people, when they get into selling, they kind of already started from a very negative place. And what I mean by that is, how many times have we had conversations with people where we say, oh, I'm a sales trainer, and somebody looks, if I say I'm a sales trainer, somebody looks at me like I'm one step above a scam artist, especially if it's an introvert. They're like, oh my gosh, no, I hate sales. Well, how am I going to have a great and positive conversation when it comes to that now? Now, firstly, you shouldn't be selling when you're networking, and we can talk about that. But if I was, or even if I was just trying to create a relationship, that's in a really negative place. Now I'm in a defensive position. Now, if I say I'm in marketing, they might go, oh, I've got a marketing coach or a marketing advisor. Now I'm again in an awkward place. Or they might say, oh, I need marketing. How much do you cost? None of that is positive, because now I'm defending, I'm trying not to talk about price before I foster a relationship. So what I tell people is that they have to start from creating that point of difference where they don't fit into a box. And the best example I can give of that is actually a language coach out of California. She taught kids and adults Mandarin. And if you think that your industry is commoditized, maybe you're an accountant, maybe you're an attorney, think about a language tutor, because not only did she have to deal with, and she successfully for a decade sold language tuition for $50 to $80 an hour. But then all these people were moving into California, and they were willing to charge $20 to $30 an hour to get their first clients. Not only that, there were people in China, thanks to this global economy we live in, willing to charge $12 an hour on Craigslist because that's great money in China. Now, on top of that, there's technology now. I teach you Mandarin, you teach me English. We just won't charge anyone anything. So she comes to me, she's like, how do I compete in this crowded market? She asked me the same question you just did, right? Can I just rely on my ability to sell? Can you teach me a better way to sell? Well, that's still a spiral to the bottom, because you're always going to not get certain clients, and you're always going to be starting from a position of, I'm more expensive because here's all this additional value. Well, why not just move yourself out of that battle altogether? So we did that with Wendy. We looked at all the clients she'd worked with, and of all of those, we discovered 2 people, and it really was just 2. And these were executives being relocated to China. And she did so much more for these people than just language tuition. Firstly, she helped them understand the difference between e-commerce in China and the Western world, the importance of respect, like learning the language isn't enough. You've got to reduce your accent, how to handle a business card, and why it matters so much. But most importantly, she helped them understand that while in the Western world, a average bad salesperson, I'll say bad salesperson because I would never suggest this, at the end of 45 minutes would say something horrible like, so do you want to move forward? And we get the answer, yes, no, or let me think about it. Well, if we get the let me think about it response, we might reach out a week later and ask the same question. And if they still say they're thinking about it, we know we're not getting that sale. Well, she helped them understand that in China, they're probably going to want to see you maybe 5 or 6 times before they even discuss business. They're probably going to want to see you drunk over karaoke once or twice. That's just the kind of person they are. And the reason for that is they're talking 20 to 50-year deals, not transactional or 12-month contracts. So the character of the person is most important to them. And I'm like, look, Wendy, stop. You're doing so much more for these people than just language tuition. What are you doing? Now, she, like so many people, like you when we first met, right? So stuck in her functional skill and didn't actually she took for granted the things that she did to help people that other people saw as phenomenal. And with Wendy, I said, look, you're stuck in your functional skill. Is it fair to assume as a result of this assistance, these people are going to be more successful in China? And she's like, that's the point, right? I said, well, great. Why don't we call you the China Success Coach then? Yes, there's value in Mandarin education, but there's so much value in this stuff. So why don't we focus on just that? And why don't we create what we ended up calling the China Success Intensive? Now, she loved the idea of this, but she's like, well, who do I sell it to? And I'm like, well, think about that for a second. What do you think? And she's like, well, obviously it's the executive. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I was terrified moving to the US and they speak the same language. I get that, but I don't think it's your right client. She's like, well, obviously the company would pay. And I'm like, yeah, I get that too. I mean, a lot of times they've got millions of dollars riding on an executive being successful, but I don't think it's your ideal client. Frustrated now, she's like, well, who then? And I said, well, I think it's the immigration attorney. And she's like, what? And I'm like, well, think about it. These girls make $3,000 at the most for doing a visa. They may charge $7,000, but they got a cost of getting customer. They've got to handle with all the bureaucracy and the paperwork that comes with the visa. They've got staff to pay for, rent. They'd be lucky to make $3,000 a visa. So just offer them $3,000 for an introduction that works out. And she's like, well, what would I do? And I'm like, well, just go to networking events where immigration attorneys hang out. Now, they love the idea. They're like, double my profit for a simple introduction. What do I have to say? And she said to them, look, all you got to do is when they get their visa, help them realize that there's a lot more to it than learning the language, getting their visa and having a place sorted. That there's all these other things. There's a lot more to it, and they should speak to me at the China Success Coach. Now, she then got recommended by the attorney. The organization's motivated to pay. The executive's terrified to go. I mean, she charged $30,000 for this, made $27,000 after a commission fee for the easiest sale in the world instead of struggling every day to charge $50 to $80 an hour in a crowded market. That's the power of first understanding the value of a unified message, China Success Coach, and then understanding the power of niching down. Now, for her to do that, what you've got to do is you've got to say, what are the things I do outside the scope of my functional skill? For her, respect, rapport, and e-commerce. What's the higher level benefit of that? China Success. Where for me, it's that I'm a marketing specialist, I'm a branding expert, I'm a master in NLP. I mean, truthfully, I'm too many things and nobody cares. But when I say, what is the total value of the fact that I can put all of that together and my unique experience and background, and by the way, everybody has unique experience, past customers, past upbringings that allow them to help an individual group that nobody else can. And when I looked at what is the thing that really, what's the high level benefit of that, that was what made me the rapid growth guy. And that's what made you the value whisperer. When we first chatted, it was like you were doing all these things and you were like, I can help people with this and I can help people with this. And I'm like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And if you're the Swiss Army knife, people see you as a jack of all trades and a master of none. And as soon as we picked that value was really what your proposition was, I mean, you can speak to this, but people all of a sudden started to go, well, yeah, that's exactly what you did for me. And all of a sudden it created this focus of the group that you helped and the message that you shared. And that's what creates the momentum, not just in networking, not just in sales, but it allows you to get your message out in this world of digital marketing where everyone's taking a photo of their donut out in the world. Because the truth is, if you can't be the clearest, you have to be the loudest. So that's why people are taking a photo of their dog, their donut on Instagram for something to say, because they have to be the loudest. Where for Wendy, for myself, and for you, we can now focus on being the clearest. And that allows us to break through the noise. And gosh, that makes sales easier.
You have touched on just so much there. Thank you. But yeah, the question was, is sales all about the sales conversation or is it bigger than that? And I totally agree with you. It starts with the minute you say hello, because the first sale is yourself. If people don't like you or they don't get you, then it's really hard to take that relationship further than that. And you see so often people introducing themselves, they say, oh, I'm an accountant. And then automatically you have this preconception of what an accountant is, what they do. Do you need one of those? So having this unified message, as you call it, really helps you bypass that and have a more constructive conversation around the value that you offer. And I see that as so important, but it's hard to do for yourself, isn't it? Because that's always what I've done, is help people identify, believe in their value, and then communicate that with confidence and weave it through everything they do to create this amazing experience. But I was so close to that. I couldn't see it until you said, hold on a minute. I was like, oh yeah, that fits. And that's what I do for a lot of my clients, is the same thing. They're so close to all of their expertise. Pinning down that one thing is quite difficult. And what helped me in that process is going back, just like you did with Wendy, is like, well, what is the biggest piece of value your clients have taken away?
Yeah, I think with a lot of people is they've just done this certification or they've just read this book or this thing took them a lot of effort to learn. So they're so connected to those things. It's really hard to just separate yourself from that and go, yeah, even though that stuff took a lot of effort, this is like my natural gift. Right. And we take it for granted. I mean, Wendy did that just because she knew it. She didn't spend time learning how to teach that. She spent a lot of time learning how to become a better tutor. For you, you probably, when you started your business, just like everybody else, we say, well, how do I become a better coach? And what theory is out there to learn? And we start to really educate ourselves. And because that has a recency effect on us, we focus more on that. And we tend not to focus on what we're truly amazing at. But it's also fear. I mean, when you think about going out in business for yourself, any client is a good client when you first start. And it's terrifying to think that you have to turn clients down, right? So when you say, I'm just going to focus on people that know that they don't know how to help people with their value, explain their value, articulate their value right, and I'm going to help them do that. Well, what if somebody needs help with this thing or this thing and this thing? And right now, should I really be saying that I won't help them with those things? Absolutely you should. Now, for me, I understand that. I mean, it's a tough thing, but I would say, I specialize with introverted service providers because firstly, that's who I love to help. But truthfully, some of the biggest billion-dollar product companies in the world are my clients. Some are extrovert, salespeople I've had huge success with. But because I don't work exclusively with introverts, it doesn't stop me from being able to work with those people. And truthfully, when I get referred, I could say I'm a dentist on my website now. People wouldn't care. They'd still reach out and say, hey, can you help me out with that rapid growth thing? Because people, when they refer you, they're talking about the success they've had. So when you think about niching it, it makes it a lot simpler when you say, I'm just going to specialize. Also, the other thing is that when you talk about value, what you're really using is that as an attraction method. For instance, there are people that I coach on other things outside rapid growth, but they all started with me in rapid growth. It's the tip of the spear, because if you're going to break through the noise, you've got to be seen as a specialist in just one thing. Because if you're seen as a generalist, well, first thing is you're not going to break through the noise, but then why would somebody pay you what you're worth? Because you're not articulating what you're worth, because you're saying I can help you with everything, so can a lot of people. But your speciality is the thing that people are going to pay you a premium for. So your psychology is working against you. A lot of people think that when they go out networking, it's about getting somebody to like them. And I mean, you're 100% right, but the way you do it is likely wrong, right? So people think about it from a small talk perspective, right? Oh, I got to get better at small talk. Well, I'm terrible at small talk now. As a matter of fact, on Introvert U, which is a platform to support introverts that I founded with a group of others, that on that platform, I have a literal sales training called the No Small Talk Sales Meeting, because I have never been great at small talk. And I used to, in my book, I talk about how to systemize it so that you can have small talk in a comfortable way. And then I realized in these new condensed Zoom 30-minute meetings, I actually can completely get rid of it by helping people see that I've really done my homework beforehand and I want to jump in, and that's in their best interest. And I can completely sidestep it. But in networking, it's even easier, because what happens is people follow the extroverted playbook, and it doesn't even work that well for them, to be honest. But what they go into a room and they're like, do you want to buy from me? No, what about you? What about you? What about you? I mean, transactional networking is horrible. But then aimless networking doesn't really work either. And some extroverts feel comfortable doing that because they don't feel comfortable doing transactional networks, so they do that. Introverts always are doing aimless networking. What is it you do? Well, my day job is, if you don't even act like you like it, why would they hire you? And that's why you have all these loose conversations with people that you end up bringing all these business cards, and you tell yourself, well, if they call me, I'll work with them. But they never do, because you didn't even articulate your value correctly. Now, where does that come from? Well, it comes from an inability to understand how to network in a precise way. And what I mean by that is, firstly, you should research who's going to be in the room before you even go. And there's a ton of ways to do that, especially if it's like meetup groups and things like that. They all have their LinkedIn profiles or their Facebook profiles, connected to their registration. And usually there's a group with past photos. So it's so easy to see who's likely going to be there and connect with them in advance. So it feels like a bunch of contrived, planned meetings, as opposed to I'm just winging things, which truthfully will just get you talking to somebody that's trying to sell you insurance. But then when you get there, be interested rather than interesting, and get to them to the point where they're like, oh my gosh, Matthew, I've been talking about myself for 20 minutes. I haven't even asked you what you do. Now, what is that? Now, when they ask that question, usually what people will do is say, well, my day job is, or, I've got a company that does this, or my business is this, or I'm an accountant. Now, if somebody's had this, and I hate this, but if they've learned the standardized structure for networking, elevator pitches, they'll say something like, I do this for this group of people, even if they have this common problem. Like, I help small businesses obtain sales success, even if they think they don't have the gift of gab, right? Something horrible like that sounds contrived, it's uncomfortable. What I do is different. When somebody asks, I say, oh, thanks for asking. I'm the rapid growth guy. full stop. Why? Because I've just been interested in them for 20 minutes. They're not going to let me stop at that. But then secondly, I've said it like I'm an accountant. And they're like, well, am I supposed to know what that is? They're inquisitive. They can't put me in a box. And people, their brains function in this way. Until I can put you in a box, I can't disqualify you or work out if you can help me. And on top of that, because you've been so interested in me, I feel like I need to ask, but I also want to ask. So I say, what exactly is that? And then I respond very differently. I respond with, well, one of the things I love to see more than anything in the world is an amazing introverted service provider with enough talent, skill, and belief in themselves to go and start a business of their own. But what I find more often than not is they get stuck in this endless hamster wheel of struggling to find interested people, trying to set themselves apart, trying to make the sale, all while feeling like the people they're talking to only care about one thing: price. Do you know anyone like that? Now, if I've done my research, I'm at a networking event where all those people are like that. But then secondly, the person I'm talking to is pre-planned, so I already know that they're CEO or director of their own business. So they'll say, yes, I'm like that. And I said, well, I'm on a mission to help introverts like yourself realize that you're not a second-class citizen. Your path to success is just different. And instead of focusing on your functional skill, which you're amazing at, just by focusing on 3 things outside the scope of your functional skill, you can really have a rapid growth business that revolves around you, your family, and your life, not the other way around. Actually, let me give you an example, and then I might tell a story, maybe the story of Wendy. But at the end of that, I'll say, does that make sense? And they're like, oh my gosh, yeah, I need what Wendy has. Now, notice the difference in what I did. The first one is, I do this, I'm amazing at this, here's my resume. The second one is, I'm passionate about this. I'm on a mission to see this change in the world. I'm here to help this group of people. It's not about me. As a matter of fact, I don't even say what I do. That's what the story's for, right? That articulates it in a way that people can connect to the tangible outcome. In the first introduction, I get them to a point where they're like, oh my gosh, this is different. I can feel this person's energy and care, which by the way means that you need to connect what you do to your passion. But by doing that, it completely shifts the conversation. And for the first time, they feel like the person they're talking to actually is trying to make a difference rather than trying to get a client to pay for the new car that they want to buy. And that shift in their psychology allows them to go, oh my gosh, I need that, and feel like they can trust you if they're in that situation. Think of who they can refer you to that may be in that situation, or invite them on your podcast, or do all sorts of things that benefit you. On top of that, because I say I specialize with introverted service providers, if they're an extroverted product-based business, they're likely going to say, Matt, I'm actually an extroverted product-based business, but based on the story you told me, I feel like that would still apply to me. And they try and steal your passion for what they do, because the truth is they've never experienced that before. It is a superpower to speak from passion and mission. But you have to get asked, and that's why you need a unified message like the China Success Coach, the Value Whisperer, or the Rapid Growth Guy to start, because it gets that hook, just like you see on a billboard with a hook to get you to lean in. It does the same thing in networking. And once you nail how to articulate that correctly in the real world, then you can leverage that using automation and a far less effort and hustle in the digital world to get your ideal clients to chase you, which vanilla-based people that just spew out a bunch of jargon that is just like everyone else in their commodity box. I mean, you just have to work crazy hard just to say, hey, I'm still here, I'm still here. Do you know I've got a dog? I'm really friendly, like me. That's terrible. Everything I do is contrived, everything I do is pre-planned, and everything I do is automated. I mean, the only thing I do that's out there in the world is a podcast interview like this, which gets set in a time that suits me. And then it goes out into the world and I get to feel like I'm helping lots of people. In truth, you can only see me for those video watchers from the waist up. But in the past, it was just audio. So I could be wearing pajama pants below this and you wouldn't know. I get to do this from the comfort of my own home and help so many people. Unless, of course, somebody's paying me to come out and speak at their event, in which case they're paying, great money for me to make it worthwhile and for me to dedicate the opportunity cost of, giving up a whole bunch of podcast interviews that I would be doing otherwise.
Thank you for sharing this so completely, a very different way of thinking about how we bring the right people into our business and create that connection. And each month I run an online networking event mainly for introverts. We do things a little bit differently. I always give them a theme or a question to talk about. So we bypass this small talk, as you say. And the last time I asked them to share, if you could make something happen as a result of your work 20 years from now, what would that impact be? So they shared their vision. And when they came back into the room, you could just see the vibe was so different. And what was really interesting, and it ties into what you were saying there, is that the other person could completely remember what that vision was, what they do. They could remember the story around it because they'd connected with the energy and passion of that person. And you were saying earlier, you get all these referrals, and that's the key to referrals, is they have to be able to talk about you rather than say, oh, go and speak to Matthew. He's really nice. He does something in sales. They can really say, go and speak to Matthew. He helps people get this kind of result. And they can bring you more of those targeted ideal clients your way just by sharing a story. And because the way you were doing it is bringing people into that conversation at marked points in your story, then they feel part of that. It's almost like they're collaborating on your introduction with you. And so they feel more responsible and part of that. And I've seen that work so well in my own networking. And so thank you for sharing that, because it's just such a great introduction and a way of inducting people into what we do that is missed by so many people. You say they just do this bland vanilla introduction. And these days, everyone is online. A lot of my clients now are people who've been in business 5, 10, 15 years. And up until now, it was easy. Clients just came to them. But suddenly, everyone's online, everyone's a coach, they're trying to differentiate themselves. And it's really hard. But that unified message is a perfect way of doing that, because people can't fail to lean in and say, you what now? And then you have permission, because you can't sell without permission. You have permission to tell them that next bit of your story and bring them back in and then tell the next bit. So it works so well. So thank you for taking us through that.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And I will say that, again, going back to what I said at the beginning, most people will be looking at what we just discussed and how much energy I had and how clearly I articulated, well, hopefully clearly articulated the stories and everything like that. And they'll be like, there's no way. Maybe he was introverted, but he's not now. Introversion is as simple as where you draw your energy from. And at the end of this, I guarantee I'm exhausted. I actually have time planned after this, because I have to allow for it to re-energize, because truthfully, I can't do it at this speed, at this energy, unless I do have recharge time afterwards. If I'm going straight into coaching a client, I'm not as good at active lifting. I'm a little bit too direct, and potentially that can be not positive for a client. I have to be very careful about those things. But everything that I've shared today was also practiced. Now, does that make me less authentic? No, I really am passionate about what I'm doing. I actually feel charged up until I get off something like this, and then I hit a wall, right? Because I'm doing what I love, but eventually, you have to realize that your battery is getting depleted. But also, the story that I shared is a story I've shared 1,000 times before. Did I not make it relevant to the audience? Well, of course I did. Did I not feed it into the exact question? Well, of course I did. But I didn't have to worry about that piece. So I only had to focus on making it relevant, which is so much easier. So a lot of the times when people say, well, I don't have that natural gift of gab, I'm like, well, why don't you systemize? Oh, I don't want to sound robotic. Do you feel like I sounded robotic today? I hope not. And by the way, how about Leonardo DiCaprio in Gangs of New York? Did you find him really authentic and engaging? Yeah, he embodied the part. I mean, that's one of my favorite movies, so I hope that you think he was good. But again, he's an introvert, by the way, reading a script that he has embodied. The difference is lack of practice and also a closed mind to not willing to try, because we feel like it might make us feel robotic or rehearsed. Well, today I've taken rehearsed stories, rehearsed structure, and I put it behind passion, and then focus my entire attention on making it relevant and custom to the specific people that I was shared with beforehand was this audience. And introverts just can't do that by winging things. And truthfully, extroverts just speak at a person if they do that, which is why everybody benefits from planning and preparation.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I was presenting recently the Shy Girl's Guide to Networking at a workshop. And one of the people said, yeah, but if I plan my introduction and I plan my client stories and my brand stories and all of this, I won't come across as spontaneous. I'll come across like I've planned this. It's like, no, you won't, because you won't have to think about that element of what you're going to share. Instead, you have more time to focus on what they're actually saying, which is what you were just saying, what they're actually saying, and then bringing in just the right elements to that. So it just flows beautifully, and you're giving more value through that. And it doesn't come across as contrived in the least. It actually gives you more space of spontaneity. And as you say, if you're an introvert, that takes energy. So the more we can save some of that energy by pre-planning and preparing, the better. And it does work so well. So yeah, thank you again for sharing that.
My pleasure. And look, I can tell you up front, my wife and I have this like little joke where, because I stumble on my words every now and then, and I kind of get stuck in my head when it's something that's not a topic matter I know really, really well. And, we have this joke where I laugh and I say, I'm a professional speaker because, I make a great income speaking all over the world. And yet in my personal life, I still get jumbled in my words from time to time. And so when I'm answering questions and things, there's a lot of those questions that I've thought about, every question that people could ask, and really rehearsed a lot of them. And then sometimes I say, well, that's a really good question, but it's a longer answer. Why don't you come and ask me afterwards? It gives me time to rethink. Now, years of experience, that doesn't happen ever. But in the start, it did. Or I'd say, that's a longer answer. I tell you what, I'll record a custom video that you can share, the whole audience will get access to, where I answer that in a lot more depth because I want to make sure everybody else gets a chance, right? I came up with scripts that I could use to be comfortable. And I will say that the first chapter of the Introverts Edge book, I talk about a guy with a chronic stutter. And through planning and preparation, his stutter went away when he was selling because he didn't get stuck in his head trying to work out what to say. He knew exactly what to say. And because of that, he actually came across as more available to the person as opposed to less available and reserved. So it's a really powerful thing to do this preparation. But the trouble is there's a twofold. One is we lack belief and therefore we're unwilling to put in the effort. So we have to fix the belief issue and then the effort will become worthwhile. But if you don't A, believe you can, and B, do the work, and obviously C, follow actual and methodical process, then you just won't get there. And every one of those factors is super important. And usually introverts lack all three.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that belief part is so key because otherwise you come up with naff introductions like, oh, I just do this little thing. You have to really believe and have that confidence to start that whole process. So yeah, and I would love to speak to you all day about this entire process, but I know we don't have to because people can download for free that first chapter, which gives them the entire structure. Where can they find that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, firstly, going back to the unified message, what I would recommend, because a lot of people kind of say, well, how am I going to go about doing this? But we just said that you need to really find someone to do this with because, like with Melitta, she struggled to do it by herself. I really struggled to do it by myself. A lot of clients struggle to do it by themselves. So what I would do is even press pause on the video right now, I won't be offended, and find somebody else that that doesn't have your functional skill. Like if you're a business coach, don't do this with another business coach. Otherwise, your two functional skills, you're both going to be stuck in the weeds, right? If you're a business coach, find an attorney or an accountant. If you're an accountant, go find a florist or an architect. But find somebody else, get them to watch this video, and then say, we're going to do this template together. Now, I'm suggesting that this exercise will take about 2 hours for the two of you. So get them to listen to this, set a time to actually do this together. But if you go to matthewpollard.com/growth, there you'll be able to download a template that will help you create your unified message and discover your niche of willing to buy clients. I did this at the National Freelance Conference a couple of years back. At the end of the session, I said, who here now believes they have a unified message, their version of the China Success Coach, the Rapid Growth Guy, that message that will excite and inspire people to want to know more, and they've identified a niche of wanting, willing to buy clients, people that will pay them what they're worth. And like 97% of the room puts their hands up, which sounds fantastic until I tell you that I said, look, do me a favor, keep your hands up if this is the most time actively spent working on your marketing, not reading books about it, but actually doing the work. And like 85% of the room put their hands up. I mean, the whole session was 90 minutes long. So the key is that this absolutely works if you do it. And as I said, you don't need to hire me to do that. Just go to the matthewpollard.com/growth and you can download that template. Now, if you don't believe that you can sell or you don't have a standardized process to follow, again, my publisher hates me when I say this, you don't need to buy my book. Just go and download the first chapter from the introvertsedge.com and it will help you believe that you can sell. It'll help you realize why you actually have natural gifts that will allow you to outsell your extroverted counterparts. And then it will give you the initial framework that you can use to double your sales. And if you believe you can't network, then go to the introvertsedge.com/networking and you can download the first chapter of that book, which will allow you to realize that you can network and then give you a methodical process to do so.
Yeah, fantastic. And they're both great books. I've read them both. And Matthew, thank you so much. Is there anything before we wrap up that you feel that people need to know to help them really believe in their ability to sell and start building that process for themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. Pick one battle to fight at a time. is what I would choose. So, you know, you've heard today, I've talked about sales, I've talked about networking, I've talked about branding and messaging. I'm sure in this podcast, you know, you're going to hear everything from other sales strategies and systems to social media, right? So the problem that most people have, firstly, don't go to what's comfortable, go to what's most important, even if it makes you uncomfortable, right? Get it out of your comfort zone, because that's where the magic happens, and that's what gets your business to survive, because it's much more uncomfortable to have to go back to work every day because the business failed. So my suggestion really is to pick one battlefield and really focus on that. So if it's sales, then focus on, whether it's me or anyone else, focus on one methodical system. If it's networking, same. If it's social media, then find someone, follow their methodical process, but just do that and put your blinkers on to everything else. You know, quite frequently people say, oh, Matt, you should do this tactic or you should do this tactic. And the great thing about having a great strategy is you can really employ any tactic and get far more than average results, which is why when a lot of people try tactics without strategy, it works well until everybody else is doing it. Now you've just got another full-time job doing something else. So my recommendation to people is pick one thing and focus on that until you've got your widget off the line. You've got that basic system, and then make the decision whether or not your time is better spent putting a few more bells and whistles on, or picking some other objective. Like if you pick sales, maybe it's networking, or maybe it's really articulate, introducing new packages, or going more viral online. Whatever it is, pick the next thing, because what happens is usually people get to the end, they say, I'm going to try these 16 things, and I'm going to focus a little bit on each one. And our brain, I mean, it's a supercomputer. It processes 2 million bits of information every single second, but our brain processes about 126 bits of that, which means it deletes, distorts, and generalizes everything we see, feel, hear, and touch based on our beliefs, our values, our past experiences. And a subset of that is our goals and objectives, right? So if you're focusing on just 6 things, you got 21 bits of information every single piece, and it might be taking you in opposing directions. So focus on one mountain to climb and focus on mastering that, and set a goal to achieve a specific target. And once you knock that out of the park, put your head up and say, should I be focusing more time on this, or should I be focusing on other things? And don't make this a 6-year objective. Focus on something that's within 3, 6, 8 months at the most, because usually most people set goals and fail at achieving any of them. So we need to build that self-efficacy of achieving. So I'm not going to be the best salesperson in the planet. I'm not going to be a sales master. I'm not going to have a perfect system with a closure rate of 80%. I'm just going to have a widget system that comes off the line where I feel like I know what step follows each and what thing to say, and my closure rate's at least this. That's a great first milestone.
Yeah, I love that. And it gives me the perfect excuse to use my favorite saying, which is, you can't ride 2 horses with one ass.
No, otherwise you just become the...
Yeah,
yeah.
Exactly. Personally, I just do one thing every 3 months. That's my focus, because 1 month isn't enough time. 3 months, you can get something really juicy done, then move on to the next thing and feel really accomplished. So I love that you focused in on that. It's so powerful. If this has really resonated with everybody, then of course they can go and get your books and learn more. But where else is the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people should definitely connect with me on all social medias. I'm on all of them. And, you know, I'm also very much involved on YouTube as well, because, I mean, it taught me how to sell. So I kind of feel like I have to repay that debt. So I put a ton of content out there in the world for free. But yeah, if you go to MatthewPollard.com, there's a ton of other resources there. I've got a podcast called the Introverts Edge podcast, which I'm sure people will love. And then for those people that are introverted, that just kind of feel like, and maybe like whether you resonated with my stuff or not, I hope you did, but whether you're kind of in that situation where you're like, you know what, I know I'm an introvert and I want to learn a whole bunch of tactics and strategies, or just really to believe in myself as an introvert, you know, we founded a platform called the Introvert U, and Introvert U is an amazing platform that has a ton of little micro courses, so you can just jump in and do one thing, to pick one mountain to climb, you know, on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis, as we highlighted. So, you know, and it also gives you that community. I mean, obviously I've got other programs and things like that, but it blows my mind how many times people start by jumping into somebody's program when there's just so many resources that are available. Like I've said, download the first chapters, apply that, get an ROI. Sure, reinvest the success of that into buying the book, because that'll help you get to the next path. But really focus on keeping it simple and focus on one strategy and one system. So, you know, whatever it is, Find a social media video they've created where I give you a tactic or a technique, apply that, get a win. Go to my blog at matthewpollard.com, read that blog, pick one idea and go and apply that. That's what I want to see people do, because the truth is introverts believe that they can't. And as soon as you get beyond that belief and get one win to prove otherwise, then all of a sudden it's like a rocket for your business, because then you realize that all these things that have been holding you back are all self-imposed. And that's what I want for everyone listening.
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people have all the cogs, but they're not quite coming together because they're missing these little bits of information. But go and fill those gaps. And as you said, that a lot of the free content is already out there for that. So Matthew, thank you so much for everything you've shared today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found it valuable. I would love it if you let me know what your biggest takeaways have been in the comments section or in the Dream Clients Club on School. And if you did enjoy the show, then be sure to leave a review and share this podcast with your network and business besties. There are a lot more tools, tips and insights coming up for you in the next episode, so don't miss next week's podcast. Or, better still, subscribe now so you never miss your weekly dose of inspiration. I'm Melitta Campbell, business coach and value whisperer, and I look forward to seeing you again in the next episode.